Welcome to Babblecom 5. This is episode 8 of season 2 of Babylon 5, A Race Through Dark Places. It seems Earthforce military traffic has impacted the station's budget as other ships have been routed away, but things should normalise soon. However, the less happy news is that Sheridan and Ivanova are going to have to start paying for their quarters, which have been deemed too big for their needs. 30 credits a week apparently isn't a lot, but Sheridan is taking the high ground and saying that neither he nor Ivanova should have to pay it, given they're on call 24/7, 365 days a year. Sheridan is often one about it, while Ivanova is just bemused by his reaction. I think this is the first exterior shot of Mars we've seen, and next, the return of Mr. Bester, being his usual, pleasant, terrifying self. The core is father, the core is mother. Apparently, there's an underground railroad helping unregistered telepaths escape the core, and Bester's prisoner has answers. He starts reciting a nursery rhyme to try and block Bester, but Bester is all in, and telepathically squeezes the life out of him, at the last moment catching a clear thought. The clearinghouse for the railroad is Babylon 5. Koenig just plays Bester so brilliantly. The abso-fraggin-lutely catchphrase has arrived, as Sheridan makes his determination clear to Franklin. This is how it all starts. Give them an inch and they take a mile, etc. Franklin's diagnosis is that Sheridan is doomed. Then, out of the blue, Delenn asks to speak to Sheridan in private, explaining that she wishes to spend some time not talking shop with him so that she can better understand humans. Sheridan will arrange dinner for that evening. As he puts it to himself, 1 minute they're shooting at you, the next they're taking you out to dinner. A Psychor representative is coming on board from what might be the Asimov. Nice shot of the docking bay, with the transport landing on what the perspective is basically going to be the ceiling. This is the area where the Narn transport had an accident in the first season. There look to be 4 compass point entrances into the docking bays from here. Bester briefs the command crew on the underground, and tellingly, when Sheridan says he'd like to speak to his people, Talia leaves the room with Bester. They'll help Bester, but they feel pretty dirty about doing it. If one of us suggests Sheridan check the files on the Ironheart incident we were privy to in the first season in Mind War to better understand Bester's methodologies. Outside, Talia asks Bester if he's scanned them. He doesn't actually answer her question, and she asks if he's scanned her. He says she'd know if he did, but she refutes that, saying not if it was just a surface scan. He says he doesn't suspect her of anything, so why would he? Just then, Bester gets a flash of someone calling him a murderer. Talia doesn't hear it, and he tells her to drop her walls. They both listen with their abilities, letting thoughts flow over them, but hear nothing other than normal background thoughts. But Bester is now confident the underground telepaths are here. And he's right. The telepath who was scoping him out now meets with the others in Down Below, and we've seen one of them before in Chrysalis. He spoke with Garibaldi and filled in a lot of the blanks about his friend who uncovered the plot to assassinate the president. He's clearly part of the railroad, and they feel they're going to have to kill Bester in order to protect their operation. Delenn arrives for her dinner in a very fetching, very human evening dress that turns heads as the saleswoman said it would, and Sheridan has a few pointed remarks for the onlookers once he remembers to put his eyeballs back in their sockets. This is probably the most relaxed and casual we've ever seen Delenn, which is rather nice. In Earhart's bar, Garibaldi is paying for the next round because he's come to speak to Ivanova about official business, which he had hoped to keep quiet. He figured her as the one running the railroad given her anti-core attitude, but she disappoints him. It's not her. And he has some other news for her too. At dinner, everyone, bar the waiter, Sheridan and Delenn, have left. A cat story is followed up by Delenn talking about gogs, their equivalent on Minbar, reminding us not to take ourselves too seriously. Sheridan admits he never thinks of Minbari laughing and asks if it's new to her with her change. No, the Minbari believe no race can be truly intelligent without laughter. Vorlons? In any event, they learn about laughter for a year, and Sheridan notes that some Earth cultures do similar things. Delenn says they have more in common than they realise. Bester contacts Talia late in the evening to offer breakfast the next day to improve their relationship. She agrees, though not happily, and her thoughts turn to Ironheart and the telekinetic gift he left her that she now seems to be more proficient with. We see flashbacks to Mind War from the first season, possibly the first time that's happened inside a Season 2 episode. Talia can't understand why Bester hasn't recognised what she was given, when she believes he has already been inside her head twice during the day. She suspects that telekinesis wasn't the only gift he left her with, perhaps just the most obvious. Sheridan returns from dinner to find himself locked out of his quarters, just as Ivanova is locked out of hers. She's tried a few things to get back in, to security's consternation, with no joy. Either they cough up, or move to smaller quarters. Sheridan's still not for budging, and demands both he and Ivanova sleep in his office rather than renting rooms for the night. And down below, the rogue telepaths are arming, whilst reciting Mary Had a Little Lamb in unison to strengthen their block. Ivanova is even less amused when trying to get comfy on a sofa, when Sheridan starts regaling her with Minbari and Vorlon jokes. She declares his wife a saint. Sheridan is happy, being an intelligent being by Minbari standards. Breakfast does not go according to plan. Bester begins by fishing for the thoughts of the senior officers on the death of President Santiago, but Talia reiterates the line of it being an accident just before Bester psionically picks up on the fact that they're being targeted. He turns over their table for cover as the rogue telepaths open fire. Unfortunately for them, he's a crack shot. However, Talia has cleared out and is sedated and captured by other rogues. Bester then has a confrontation with Garibaldi over their motivations, and Bester is very unconcerned over Talia's fate because she doesn't know anything that can harm the core. Bester says Garibaldi has 2 bodies and he should make the most of them. Talia awakens surrounded by rogue telepaths. The leader says they don't wish to hurt her, but they will if they have to. He wants her to understand why they're running. In Sheridan's office, Franklin reveals he's in contact with the underground and that Talia is fine, that it isn't a hostage situation. He can arrange a meeting with the leader of the underground if Sheridan will agree to meet alone to try and find a way out. Meanwhile, Talia is listening to the stories of the rogues, nudging her towards a realization that her belief in the court should not be as black and white as it is. Garibaldi speaks to Bester, who tries and fails to win Garibaldi over by telling him he's a married man with a 5-year-old daughter who he lives with on Mars and takes for picnics. Garibaldi says he needs more practice and outlines his belief that the telepaths are in down below, probably staying together for protection. He says they'll go in together in an hour. Bester agrees, but you just know he's got other ideas. Talia is now listening to a P11 who the Corps wanted to marry off to another P11 to try and get Psychop or better rated babies. This, of course, we know is what happened to Talia too from the last episode. The P11 was impregnated against her will, her child taken from her. It turns out the leader of the railroad was experimented on with Ironheart and made a P12, maybe a P13. He knows Ironheart went further, much further. They escaped together, and Ironheart helped him set up the railroad. He knows Talia was given something by Ironheart, and that she can help them if she wants to. Sheridan has arrived for his meeting, yet Franklin is there, because he is the guy running the railroad. Kapow! Makes perfect sense, of course. We know he kept Minbari medical data out of Earth Force hands during the war, and this is really an extension of his going beyond his normal medical remit. Essentially, he knows what the Corps has been doing to its own, and so with other medics has been helping to get telepaths off Earth and onto the station, where they stand a good chance of making it clear forever. Talia backs him up, telling a conflicted Sheridan that there's a third option besides turning them in and damaging the station's reputation, or disobeying orders and protecting them. The rogue's leader senses the Bester is on his way to them. And he is, PPG in hand. But Talia joins the rogues and the gloves are literally off. They stand united as one, seemingly. As Bester seems frozen, the leader accuses someone of fighting against them as they assault him mentally, at which point Talia shouts "now", and Bester opens up on the rogues, with Talia grabbing a weapon and helping him. The confrontation ends in a sea of bodies, Bester bemoaning the fact that they're all dead. He and Talia leave by different exits, pledging to deny all knowledge, Talia reciting the Corps is mother, the Corps is father. With Bester gone, we see that all the telepaths are still standing, and Franklin and Sheridan are still with them. They saw nothing, but Talia explains that with their combined strength, the group were able to break through Bester's defences and implant a telepathic projection so that as far as he knows, the leader of the railroad is dead and Talia loyal to the core. As long as Sheridan avoids him before he leaves, all should be well. The railroad will dismantle its B5 operation, so nothing illegal will be going on. As they begin to leave, their leader says to Talia that she turned the tide. Without her, they would not have broken through Bester's defences, even with the minds they had. He says that she is more than even she knows. She believes she can block Bester. He says that she is the future, and steps back into the shadows. Ivanova is prepared to tough out the quarters issue, but Sheridan says she can sleep in her own quarters, having denied being a snorer equivalent to a major hull breach. He hasn't given in, he's just redirected 60 credits from the combat readiness budget to their rent bills, on the basis he isn't combat ready unless he's slept in his own bed. So Earth is paying its own bill. Ivanova likes the symmetry. Talia sees Bester off, whilst he complains about Sheridan's attitude and paperwork. It's apparent, I think, that he tries to scan Talia, and also apparent that she's able to deflect it. Just as Ivanova has hit the horizontal, her doorbell chimes and Talia arrives bearing gifts, and an apology, saying she was wrong about the core. She needs to talk to someone, and Ivanova was the only one who came to mind. Ivanova is okay with that, but not with the Psy-Corps badge. That looms large after its removal, as the two women sit down to talk. I remember the twist in the tail of the ending, and quite frankly, Talia was very convincing as a stone-cold killer. Almost too convincing, given she's not a psychop, but then perhaps any doubts Bester would have had were suppressed. It also meant every member of the railroad could be seen to have been taken out for his benefit. I didn't, however, remember the link between the leader of the railroad and Ironheart, which of course goes a long way to explaining why he was so prepared to have the railroad members speak with her. He knew they were likely to sway her, and I suspect he asked the shooters to act knowing Bester would take them down, so that they had the chance to bring Talia on side. They've had a long time to keep an eye on her after all, and given his rating and his knowledge of Ironheart, it was probably a safe bet as far as he was concerned. It's a strong episode, and hammers home just how dark Psy-Corps really is, and how it can preach one thing whilst behaving contrary to it. Nice bit of doublethink, ironically, for an organisation full of telepaths. And again, we have an example of a season 1 episode being an important feed-in for season 2. I didn't remember the flashback, but it made perfect sense to give Ironheart a face and show Bester facing off with him. So Bester. I'm not really sure how the P rating operates, but a lone P12 going up against multiple telepaths seems decidedly foolhardy when you've only possibly got a P5 for backup. Garibaldi's animosity towards him is heightened by his throwaway attitude to Talia, and there is clearly no love lost between the two, not that there ever was any there to begin with, admittedly. This being said, Psychops are Psychops for a reason, and they're obviously trained to bring in rogues, which means their mental defences have to be very strong. So pretty remarkable for him to have been sold so comprehensively on a fiction. Were I to pick a nit, if he never fired his weapon, wouldn't he have noticed it not burning a hole in his jacket when he put it away? I think it was established in Chrysalis that PPGs don't cool down all that fast. Anyway, Koenig's performance is as intimidating and as callous as ever, to the extent that we're really not sure if he is married and does have a child, but this, of course, is what endears him to many of us fans as a character. Talia seems to be increasingly OP, as my son would put it, overly powerful. If a P12 or a P13 is respectful of her, then we know that Ironheart gave her some serious upgrades, which are only becoming apparent over time. If she's able to block a Psychop as an individual, and beyond that, block them in such a way that they don't even know they're being blocked, that's out of the ballpark power. On the comedic level, we have Sheridan battling the pencil pushers, and then rather interestingly pulling a Sinclair, diverting a budget meant for one thing to solve a completely different problem. Ironic given how he was preaching about not being able to break regs to help the telepaths, but being happy to bend the rules when it helps him personally. In amongst all the many other threads here too is the Sheridan and Delenn dinner. There is clearly something there, even if it's just laughter. There's a very different relationship to the one Delenn had with Sinclair. I'm not sure he would ever have been as casual as that with her. I think this is very interesting from Delenn because whilst we've seen Linnea with Londo in an ordinary setting, this is definitely the first time we've seen Delenn with her new hair fully down. Plus, we have Franklin being a rebellious doctor again, but that's okay, because that's what he's been established as. Nice that Garibaldi was blindsided on that front, though, assuming it was Ivanova, given her overt dislike of all things Psy. Interesting to see Ivanova fraternising with people at the bar, too. It's the socialising side of things we haven't seen a huge amount of previously. So, it's a really dense episode, this one. Some fun stuff mixing with some really dark stuff, mixing with Bester. I also really like Bester's opposite, the leader of the rogue telepaths or blips. I don't think there's a name for him, but I liked him in Chrysalis as well. It's nice that he knew Ironheart as well, because it enables him to bond with Talia far more effectively. Given the events of Spider in the Web, this episode is quite a huge shift for Talia in terms of her loyalties, going from covering up for the Corps to acknowledging to Ivanova that there's something rotten at the heart of it. So it'll be interesting to see where this leads as the second season continues to build on various strands. On a technical note, this is the first time I've had to completely re-record one of these videos from scratch, because it turned out my Blue Yeti microphone was picking up some sort of electromagnetic interference from my laptop for the first time ever. So I had this really loud background hum, and hopefully this is free of it because I've moved my microphone further away from my laptop. But interesting note to self for future recordings: make sure I do a little test recording before I carry on with the full thing, because I do it in one take and I don't stop. So I only realised about a quarter of an hour later that it was an issue. So I shall leave it here, and I shall catch you on the next one. Cheers.